Dear brothers, it is now 2 years since the General Chapter, and we return to reflect on the order, or, as our rule puts it, the spiritual welfare of the order. As we know, the rule expected that the brothers of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Mount Carmel would meet once a week to discuss matters of discipline and your spiritual welfare. Such frequency might appear somewhat exaggerated to us nowadays, but it does go to show us something of the spirit of the first community. In fact, we cannot guard and maintain the spirit of our order individually, because the experience of our being community, of being brothers, is an essential element of that very spirit. I am convinced that a priority of our gathering here now is to reinforce our bonds of fraternity, to let us sense that we form part of a much greater family wherein we share the same spirit and travel the same journey. I hope that thanks to the experiences of these days, each one of us may return to our own community or circumscription and be able to say, I am not on my own. We are not alone. We can depend on our community, on the support and help provided by the discernment of a much more extensive family. As it is customary, the definitory begins with the General's report on the state of the order. I will divide today's report into 3 sections. I will, first one, run down the activities of the definitory and of those centers that are directly dependent on the General Curia. Second, I will offer a synthetic overview of the general situation of the order. And number 3, very brief, I present the program of this particular Extraordinary Definitory. The activity of the definitory. Between June 2015 and now, the definitory has met on 9 occasions for ordinary sessions. As it is customary now, at the conclusion of each meeting, a letter was addressed to the whole order, outlining the themes that had been discussed on each occasion. Our own definitory has met twice a year with the O-Carm definitory. In November 2016, we spent a week together with our O-Carm brothers in Stella Maris, with the assistance of we have reflected on the relationship between religious and the local church, with the assistance of Father Agostino Montano. The 2 generals also address a joint letter to the whole Carmelite family for the occasion of the Jubilee of Mercy. In the summer of 2015, the full the visits of the general and definitories began. Yes, we visited the General Delegation of Israel, the 30th of November to the 6th December. And beginning from 2016, the pastoral visitations. We have visited 7 provinces: Croatia, Philippines, Vietnam, Oklahoma, Paris, Tamil Nadu, Warsaw, and Venice. And the commissariat of Sicily and 4 general delegations: Egypt, Israel, Venezuela, and Argentina. According to the procedures approved for this exennium, the decisions taken at these visitations are discussed and approved by the definitory at its first meeting afterwards. The General Curia, there has been a simplification and reduction of officials in the service of the Curia. At the moment, there are 9, whereas there were 14 in the preceding sexennium. The Secretary General is also now responsible of the archives and statistics. The purpose of the Secretary of the Missions has been redefined. The Secretary for the Missionary Cooperation. Special efforts have been made to improve our sector for communications. Sito web on Facebook, and that are brought up to date on a daily basis, Facebook and Twitter. Yes. The archives are also being upgraded. It was necessary to make more space for them to ensure that our documented patrimony is well preserved. The General Archive has its own website explaining its arrangement and characteristics and providing a whole series of publications for the use of anyone that might be interested, including the complete collection of Acta Ordinis. Our website, the Postulation General, is also near completion. One is the ongoing needs of the Curia, is that of translators, especially for English. Notwithstanding the last General Chapter's approval for a request that the provinces would offer said translators to the General Curia, I have to say that it is becoming increasingly more difficult to find collaborators. Yeah, it's difficult to find collaborators for the different centers of the order. English is especially difficult to find translators, and it is a very important language. So the General Chapter's approval of a request that the provinces would offer said translators to the General Curia. I have to say that it is becoming increasingly more difficult to find collaborators for our various centers at the service of the entire order. Among the initiatives desired by the General Chapter was the establishment of a fund for missionary assistance with contributions from all circumscriptions. As a consequence of that decision, the Definitory addressed a letter to all superiors on the 19th of December 2015, proposing 3 possible quotes for donations. Some of them very symbolic, but that is not important. It's the sensibility what matters. Yes. In 2016, from a total of 51 circumscriptions, 37 sent contributions for a total of 83,610 euros. 80,000 of these were spent in response to various requests. Today, this year, only 22 circumscriptions have sent their contribution, apart from an extraordinarily generous contribution of 1 province. We only collected 53,881 euros. Another important initiative, launched thanks to the contributions sent from the monasteries of Holland, was we really have to praise them for their sensibility, was the establishment of a fund for needy monasteries. This is run by the Secretariat for Nuns in agreement with the Father General. During the past 3 years, it has been possible to comply favorably with the request of many monasteries, especially for construction work or for the extraordinary maintenance of buildings. Yes, the monasteries of Holland have contributed a lot. Also, monasteries from Spain have also contributed. The Teresianum now, with regard to the theological faculty, I am pleased to be in a position to refer to a notable progress in many areas. First of all, 3 permanent members have been added to the community, Father Emilio Martinez, plus 2 others who have obtained their doctorates this year. Ignatius Kunapura from the Malabar province, Doctor in Biblical Theology from the Urbanianum, and Father Lukács from the Krakow province, Doctor in Fundamental Theology from the Lateran University. Thanks to the implementation of a new program, the running of the faculty's library with online consultation has improved remarkably. All issues of the publication Teresianum, Ephemerides Carmelite, may be consulted online. You can use it. Major efforts are underway to re-begin the publication of BIS, which was suspended in 2006. Luisa Tigarraga left this service because of health problems. Now we are thinking about a publication online. In collaboration with the Belgian editors Blepols, it is now hoped that to have it published online. It will limit its scope to areas of specific interest to our faculty: Carmelite studies, spiritual theology, also with the collaboration of the OCARM. They are also very involved, regarding all these publications, spiritual theology and theological anthropology. An online course in spirituality has also been introduced this year. Also, it has been good for the nuns and lay people. Collaboration between the Teresianum and Cites of Avila is progressing well. In order to be able to offer a complete cycle of studies for a license in mystical theology. That means 2 years, to add 1 year more. So yes, there will be 2 years of courses, so that they could obtain a diploma of license, by remaining always the CITES. As regards inscriptions, the number of students of the academic year just concluded was the ordinary ones. 144 students, 31st in the first cycle, so our students of the International College, 67 in the second, so the license cycle, anthropology, and 46 in the doctorate cycle. A further 78 students attended non-academic courses like counseling, also the formation for formators, non-academic courses of spiritual theology. In total, then, the faculty has 222 students. A slow but constant diminution of students has been taking place over the past few years. There were 272 inscribed in 2010. So this is something that is happening in other faculties in Rome as well. The International College. During the past 2 years, the formation community has been partly renewed with the arrival of Father Sunil Rodriguez from Karnataka, Goa province, his bursar, and Father Suresh Babu, Tamil Nadu, who takes on the role of formator next month. Regarding the students' information, we have the following statistics in the last 3 years. 2015-16, 26 students, 13 from Asia, 10 from Africa, and 3 from Latin America. 2016-17 to 17, 28 students, 14 from Asia, 12 from Africa, and 2 from Latin America. And the year that is about to begin, 25 students, 14 from Asia, 9 from Africa, and 2 from Latin America. From 2015, there are no European students. The last 2 were Polish students who completed their studies in June 2015. It is obvious that there has been a sharp decline in European vocations. However, according to the latest statistics in Europe, there were 61 temporary professed clerics plus 5 non-clerics. In 2015, 74 clerics plus 7 non-clerics in 2016. In fact, not a single of these was sent to the International College, raises questions that I, for one, would not know how to answer. I wouldn't know how to answer. This extraordinary definitory is an ideal opportunity to freely raise any eventual difficulties or problems you may have concerning the college, or indeed any other areas directly under the general curia, because these places are at the service of the order. If a service is not useful, so it's not helpful. Yeah, exactly. If you are interested. So I just received this information from the Seminario Missionum. So very briefly, I will tell you. There can be 39 students at the Collegium Missionum, but we have never had 39 students. No, it has never been completed. In 2016 and 2017, so we had 32 students, 28 Carmelites, and 4 diocesan priests. Because there were some rooms free, and we have asked ourselves, to open the possibility for others to rest in the house. And so the experience has been very positive as far as we know. So from these 28 students, Carmelites, 15 have received scholarship from the General House, and more than half The other two, they have received help from other institutions. And we have to add some priests that the General House supports because they are preparing themselves to be professors at the Teresianum. 4 of them. 2 of them have already a doctorate. So they have integrated themselves to the Teresianum. This year that is about to begin, there will be 31 students. It seems that they are all Carmelites, discussed Carmelites, and no diocesan priests. Good. So, CITES. The community has remained the same. 6 religious from 5 different countries: Spain, Colombia, Poland, Lebanon and Peru. There were 35 ordinary students in the last academic year. However, more than 400 took part as guest students at one or other of the numerous courses that are offered by the center. Among the various activities, so there are so many, I make a special mention of the Congress of St. Elizabeth of the Trinity, held in November 2016, and the next Congress program for September 2017 on the ascent of Mount Carmel, which will be the first in a series of congresses on the works of St. John of the Cross. The center also hosts interreligious meetings, one on Buddhism last July and another on Islam to be held this coming November. Just to give you an idea of the activities, the most important activities in the center. Delegation of Israel. And then with this I will conclude the first part. There have been some changes in the General Delegation of Israel. Three religious have returned to their respective provinces because of health problems: John Chianti, John Landi, and Brother Morgan Ataida from Karnataka, Goa. According to the number of members has been reduced, but 2 more have returned to Israel: Father Robert from the Krakow province, Brother Gabriel Park from the Korean province. At the moment there are 13 members altogether, 9 fathers and 4 brothers. This means that it is impossible to have an autonomous community at Muhaka. The situation will be better because, yes, the semi-province of Lebanon have offered their help, for the school in Haifa. Yeah, the semi-province of Lebanon will be helping in this regard. So they will be running the school of the parish in Haifa. So now on the second part is the situation of the order. This is all. If you want, you can read them. There are no men. There's. Yeah. In 2016, we are 4,044, all of us. Yes, it's just an estimate. Also, people information. I have given you some information. The most important information is that Europe, you can see some growth in Europe. Yeah, from 112 to 137. It says 23% of increase of invocations. Invocations, yes. It's important to know the geographical distribution of the order. We are present in 87 countries. In the last 2 years, East Timor has been added with a foundation in Dili as well as Lithuania, with the presence of 2 fathers in Kaunas. Yeah, the missionary experience in Bangladesh which was began in 2016 has been discontinued in 2016 due to the variety of difficulties. I would like to tell you, the reality of the spiritual reality of our order. On quite a few occasions previously, I have referred to this theme of the spiritual situation of our order. Our order shares in the general situation of religious life today. We might define it as a path of renewal stuck halfway, a path slowed up and even blocked to the uncertainty about the direction it is headed in, or to the complexity of the journey and the fatigue of its travelers. As the recent document, some say that we live in the society of fatigue. The document for consecrated life states, new skins for new wine. Especially in the first 3 decades after the Council, there was a generous and creative effort as renewal. It has continued in the succeeding decades, even though at a slower rhythm and with a somewhat wearied dynamism. Among aspects of renewal referred to in the document, we find changes in the legislative text, research and interpretation of the original inspiration of institutes, a search for new structures of formation, a renewal and rearranging of structures and of economic management. We thank God for all of this, but we also have to make the effort of an in-depth ownership of it, so that what has been established as a theoretical level and from documents can be translated into lived experiences. We must see our program for the revision of our constitutions in this light. We return to this point tomorrow with the assistance of Fathers Augusti and Emilio. Rapid and complex historical changes constantly question our adjustments, our habits, our way of thinking and of acting. Unfortunately, our reactions are usually rather slow and superficial. To cite the congregation's document again, we are experiencing a crisis of historical projection and charismatic profile. We must recognize that in many cases we are dealing with the inability to move from ordinary administration and management to guidelines that are adequate for the new reality to which we must wisely adapt. It is by no means an easy task to jump from the simple management of familiar situations to other goals and ideals with a conviction that inspires genuine trust. This is the end of the citation. In actual fact, this is precisely the situation in which anyone who is called to the service of authority in a religious family today finds himself, yes. At all levels. The sense of fatigue, not to say powerlessness, to move from ordinary administration, which very often has become ordinary emergency, to the prospect of new pathways, more in keeping with our charismatic identity and with the times in which we live. We are so absorbed with solving problems that we cannot even imagine other itineraries. This is an expression I'm taking from the document of the congregation. We have to stop and reflect seriously on what the real problems are, those that touch our own deepest identity, and what are the ways of development and transformation that one might suggest for dealing with them. I will limit myself to referring to some aspects of the impoverishment of a religious life that we must act upon urgently if we wish to have a present and particularly a future continuation of the high levels possible in the vocation that has been gifted to us. The first of these aspects is the contemplative dimension. The first area where we see the weakening of our religious life is the contemplative dimension. At the core of a contemplative life is the desire to know God, to recognize the features of His face right through the signs of His presence in history. God, we know that God is present in many ways. We are talking about a vocation and a fundamental orientation of a person. The person who has a contemplative dimension has something that is profound, something that is in his heart, and this takes him to desire this aspect. Yes, all those who belong to the family began by Saint Teresa have the desire of the spirit of the spirit in their hearts, even though it may be latent and buried beneath many layers of other desires, other objectives, and other gratifications. But unless there have been errors in vocational discernment, this is possible. This desire for knowledge of and union with God must be there as a seed sown in the soil of our life story. The Gospel warns us that obstacles of all kinds may hinder the growth of the seed in the soil. There are birds that carry off the seed, rocks that prevent it from rooting deeply, that suffocate its growth. But each time the seed falls and is rooted in good earth, in our own flesh, our own life, it produces fruit. Saint Teresa, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Therese, to mention only our three doctors of the Church, have opened up a path of formation that is unparalleled in the spiritual tradition of spirituality. Yeah, no one has it like this. This is especially true because their teaching evolves from lived experience and not from theoretical speculation. As a result, we can never say that we have not been well equipped for our journey. And yet, I see that we don't undertake the journey at all, or we stall at the first stage without continuing our task of exploring and discovering. Why does this happen to us? There can be so many reasons. For example, a kind of vicious circle in which we are imprisoned. We distance ourselves further and further from our contemplative vocation until it becomes strenuous to us, unintelligible, and this in turn convinces us that we must seek fulfillment elsewhere. We must recognize that it is by no means easy to live a contemplative life, all the more so at the present time. We cannot take it for granted that we are capable of it. I would even say that the contrary is true. The starting point is, in fact, that we are not capable of doing it. If we can only recognize this, we are already at a good point on our journey. Why is it difficult to be contemplatives? Because it does not simply mean observing a timetable of prayer, which is something important, but it means facing up to the transformation of a person, a process that is prolonged, slow, and very often crucifying. It is not worth our while even attempting to begin. To change the courage to renounce a way of life that is only seeking our personal comfort zone. It's not even worth it to start. I don't say it myself. Teresa and John of the Cross have told us in 1,000 ways, and perhaps we ourselves have repeated it in preaching retreats or directing penitence persons. But now it comes down to ourselves personally. We will willingly undertake it, to attempt living in this way, to embark on this adventure. Perhaps they seemed uncertain and distant goals. I see that often there's this discussion on we don't really understand what contemplation is. There is a lot of discussion about it. So we prefer to content ourselves with anything of attaining objectives nearer at hand or easier to understand. A second point, I have written so many times about this, I will be brief. Teresa has taught us the importance, indeed the necessity of passing through knowledge of ourselves to reach knowledge of God who dwells in us. Inside of us. Saint Therese says, it is absurd to think that we can enter heaven without first entering in our own souls, without getting to know ourselves and reflecting upon the wretchedness of our nature. But precisely such knowledge of ourselves and care of ourselves have become particularly difficult undertakings. We are constantly projected to things outside ourselves, Our gaze, our hearing are continually focused on electronic devices that have become appendage of our own bodies, next to us all the time. In such an ambient, listening to ourselves, to the messages arising from within and not from externals, requires courageous determination and motivation. To return to the words of Teresa, we live more and more outside the castle. We wander around its environs, take snaps of its walls, and if now and then we take a look inside, we run away terrified. Who would dare venture into such an obscure and threatening territory that seems more a labyrinth than an interior castle? At most, we might agree to take a guided tour in the company of a psychotherapist in the hope that he knows us better than we know ourselves. Another dimension, another aspect of fundamental importance for a contemplative life is our relationships with others, with a brother, with the community that we are part of. Quite often, we don't feel at home in our own communities. I'm not trying to blame anyone, so that we are conscious about it. Again, in this case, we must recognize that it is more difficult nowadays than it may have been in the past to feel at home in a religious community. The first difficulty derives from the fact that the role of the religious has lost much of its sense and traditional evidence. The uncertainty of the role, the splintering of the social bonds connected with it, the vagueness of the rules of conduct, all combine to make it so much more difficult to set up a religious community nowadays. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. Before, rules were very, very clear. The codes and behaviors were very clear. One lived in that way. So this is not the case anymore. This can be an opportunity. I'm not saying that seeing it as a loss, because we could do what Saint Teresa wanted. Be a community of friends, a community in which we share our own humanity, our humanity that believes. It's more difficult to share our spirituality than to share roles. But this is an opportunity, to live it and to live in a closer to the Teresian vision, in which all should be friends. Crisis can become an opportunity to grow and change. But to achieve this, we must invest both strenuous effort and necessary resources in community life. With communities reduced to 2 or 3, and with a significant number of religious living on their own, dispersed around the world, the objective conditions of living fraternal life in community are sadly missing. We cannot say that we appreciate the community dimension of our vocation if we then take options that lead in another direction and actually encourage individualism. Another point, charism and ordained ministry. A religious way of life is becoming increasingly more and more clericalized, limiting the theme to our own order. The collapse of vocations in non-cleric brothers is a worrying statistical reality. But it is not this fact alone. Nowadays, we identify ourselves much more in the role of an ordained minister and his work than in the role of a religious. The formation given to our young aspirants, apart from the novitiate year, is practically exclusively intellectual, with a view to the priestly ordination. In this, the document mentions it also. In this sense, religious life is inclining more and more to the side of hierarchy and institution rather to the gratuitousness of charismatic gifts. I will tell you a story. When we found ourselves, when we met with the general superiors, to talk about this document, at the end, someone asked, Are we so what side are we in? From the part of the ordained ministers of the charismatic life? The problems that we have in our relationships with bishops, there are problems among institutions, the institutions and charism. I don't know if I explain myself. It is rather. So this is a matter of fact, and we are all the religious male orders are experiencing this. While priestly ministry can depend on a sure institutional foundation and on evidence functioning, the same cannot be said for the charismatic dimension of the religious vocation. Charism is something that is absolutely gratuitous and in a sense perfectly useless, like the perfume of Bethania. This is not solely a practical problem due to an excess of activity and duties. It is a problem of mentality that is much deeper and has more serious consequences than the simple prevalence of pastoral activity in our daily lives. The problem is that doing has been superimposed on being, our way of thinking and of judging things. We see ourselves much more as priests and professionals of sacred orders than as discussed brothers of the Virgin Mary, the official title of our order, which seems to me a wonderful program of life, being brothers, being descalced. I like to interpret as disarmed, being Mary in her relationship with Christ and the Church. This doesn't resolve anything, but it resolves everything. We are obviously not doing anything bad. On the contrary, yes. On the contrary, we often operate well as pastors, parish priests, or simple priests. What is worrying about it is that we neglect or sideline the core of our vocation. I sometimes think that we operate as certain merit laity who are fine professionals, but neglect their own family or their own children. As professionals, they do great things and help many others, but they do not give their own family what they should as parents and spouses. Clericalism goes hand in hand with individualism. One of the risks of a religious who works in a parish or is involved in other activities that he carries out his ministry independently of the community and of his superiors. The parish or pastoral group or teaching or any other activity become his whole world. Nobody else may enter it to collaborate, to add some novelty, or simply to share experience fraternally. It is an obvious sign that the work is being done by a religious with vows of obedience and poverty as something trying to live as members of our community. The service has been transformed into private and exclusive property. In such a situation, the changes that would be normal in a religious life, transfers to another community, switches in the office, etc., become almost impossible. The individual is wedded to his activity, which has become his very reason for living. Would you like to stop? Would you like to pause? Are you okay? Should we continue? Okay. Let's see if I can. Cultural poverty. So this is another point I have already mentioned all the times. Should a religious be unable to relinquish certain activities that have become habitual for him, this is because of a kind of cultural poverty. Sometimes it seems that religious do not know the impoverishment of religious identity also weakens an element that we traditionally find in the life and mission religious. Our friars read little and write less. Our nuns, even the laity who frequent our houses, have difficulty in finding a friar who is capable and willing to preach a retreat or give a course on Carmelite spirituality or fundamental or moral theology. It is true that the social cultural context in which we live, where communication is reduced to imagery and brief messages, is not helpful. But precisely because of this, religious life should go against the current and give witness to a different way of living. When we speak of Teresian humanities, we should not forget that an essential aspect of this is learning to think, to listen, to express oneself. None of this comes automatically, but needs time and effort in producing something that will not have immediate or automatic results. How can we respond to other people's questions if we ourselves are we not already informed, if we know nothing more than themselves, and sometimes even less, if like them we are immersed in a world full of superficial and non-verifiable information without a critical understanding of the past or a valid projection towards the future? This poverty is also reflected in our community dialogue, where topics of conversation are normally about football, footballer, trivialities, what the means present. Well, our relationships with the nuns and the laity. In this situation of poverty at all levels, the worst scenario would be that we retreat into ourselves and not allow ourselves to avail of the riches which our Carmelite family offers. I want to underline especially the importance of a relationship with our Discalced Carmelite sisters and with those lay persons who are particularly close to the Teresian Carmel. We can and should be giving them much more than we are given, but we can actually receive much more from them. Sometimes it's hard to be with them, but it's good for us. Yeah, it forces us to find the center of our own vocation. There is the condition that we approach them not as priests, invest with sacred powers and knowing everything already, but rather as brothers engaged on the same journey and subject to the same weakness as them, but in need of help, of companionship of others.
Vengo sempre in questo a quello che può essere una proposta, ma è un interrogativo.
So this is I will continue with a question.
Riformare la vita religiosa.
How can we reform religious life? The document of the Extraordinary Definitory of 2011, so how we should be, concluded by indicating that a fundamental task of the order was to establish Teresian communities that would be places of authentic spiritual and human development, irradiating the truth and beauty that were being experienced in them. 6 years later, we can repeat the very same message in the same place. We have reread Saint Teresa. We are rereading our constitutions at the moment. We are doing all this with the intent of a serious revision of life. And so far it seems that we are really struggling to achieve this objective, the revising of our lives. This is not altogether surprising. What we really need is a serious renewal of our life. The pontificate of Pope Francis has relaunched the conciliar theme of the Ecclesia Semper Reformanda. It has been correctly written quite a few times in these 3-4 years. The Pope has expressed in different circumstances and to different audiences the necessity of reopening the chapter on reform, showing that this is connatural to the very nature of the Church. The Church is brought back by the Pope to its identity and vocation of being a restless body. The Church body has always been identified with continual change, sometimes rapid and accelerated, more often slow. One reality in the Church that has experienced constant movement throughout the centuries is religious life. Enzo Bianchi observes in one of his conferences, repeated a few times, it is not by chance begin anew has attributed to St. Anthony, the father of monachism, that has been a characteristic of monastic life, both in East and West. Yes.
Come se la sua identità consistesse in una successione di riforme senza fine. Conversione e riforma fanno parte del cammino personale e comunitario della vita religiosa, sicché questa deve essere costantemente rinnovata.
Religions have to be reunited, yes, constantly renewed. For our part, we all certainly recall the text of Saint Teresa in her foundations and repeat it at the beginning of our constitutions. It is we who are beginnings now, but let them continually strive to be beginners too, in the sense of growing better and better all the time. However, it is not possible to program reforms sitting at a table or to impose them by decrees. Reforms are born from the grassroots, wherever the Spirit blows, as He wishes, as happened with Teresa de Ahumada and the community of St. Joseph's. The General, Father Rossi, was able to see that the Spirit was effectively at work in that new foundation, even though he would certainly never have foreseen all the consequences that would derive from it. If we reflect for a moment, in actual fact, what means can a general or even a general chapter or a definitory employ to renew or to reform an institute? Anything that can be done in the practices of government, formation, or pastoral animation is inevitably institutional rather than being directed. It affects the good running of the institute rather than the life and of the charism. Naturally, the good running of an institute is praiseworthy. I feel there is a lot to be done on this regard as well. As we observed at the last general chapter, there is a big distance between our actual life and the legislative text that govern it. This cannot be interpreted solely as the normal strain between reality and the ideal. We are dealing with a genuine and joining separation. For this reason, the motive of deciding on a systematic rereading of our constitutions was to encourage a deeper understanding of the differences and a subsequent dialogue between the two. And we have to do it with honesty, sincerely. We have to say things as they are. At the level of governance of the order, I understand that our way of conducting affairs might often seem overprudent, not to say timid or hesitant. I feel that the principle attributed to St. Bernard, but I have not found the citation, and very dear to Pope St. John the 23rd, or maybe there, to notice everything, disregard many, and correct few things. It is a very wise one, and I deliberately try to abide by it. So educating the stomach for a good digestion is something fundamental. A superior has to have a good side, but especially a good stomach. Despite this, on the few occasions that is necessary to intervene in serious situations, the reaction is generally one of surprise and exasperation, as though we were actually abusing our powers. In these days, with such an attitude towards authority at all levels, efforts to correct obvious faults or to redirect mistakes are difficult tasks. or better, they are full-scale battles. Proposals for new experiences are not encouraged either. In November 2016, I asked the European provincials to consider the idea of a special year of formation for young solemnly professed or priests, and it would be an opportunity for them to repeat at a more mature stage of their lives the fundamental themes of the Ariccian Carmelite formation. Reactions were partly lukewarm, partly cold, partly decisively opposed. From my experiences, resistance, doubts, and fears prevail with regard to anything new, anything that we cannot fully grasp, or that is going to call for determined efforts. As I mentioned at the outset, quoting the document from the congregation, anyone involved in government has the unpleasant experience of being so caught up in a day-to-day problems that he is unable to propose suggestions for renewal. Of course, we must not just give up, but both. Yeah, you're listening to me very patiently, but I know that I will have to meet you all because you're already asking me to do this. I don't want to propose like big changes on the whole order, but I would like to talk with you about single problems, and this is important. But if we limit ourselves to talk about single problems, and we are not open and we are not interested to the challenges that the challenge that is in front of the whole order. Do you understand? So it seems that the words I'm telling you what I'm doing is something that has to be done and nothing else. No, giving you this report. Personally, I have no doubt that the Spirit is also breathing among ourselves. In our own Carmelite family, there are desires and rests, dreams that want to become an experienced reality. I believe that we should favor such experiences, even at the risk of making mistakes. By far, the worst mistake would be to remain static and closed to the future. Discernment is also impossible if there is not a concrete experience foundation in which to use it. I have been very struck by the words of Cardinal Martini, an expert on the Acts of the Apostles, with regard to the first council of the Church, the so-called the Council of Jerusalem, chapter 15 of Acts. He writes, if we read attentively the account of that council, we remain amazed to note that when a very practical and difficult problem had to be resolved, the mutual acceptance of Christians from Judaism and converts from paganism, they did not turn to Scripture or to any canonical tradition, but rather, before held, to reflect on they had to experience the grace of the Holy Spirit. This is the attitude that is proposed for us now, to listen to the voice of the Spirit and to draw inspiration from it for today, in humble obedience to that word that He had spoken in the Church and that still speaks in the Magisterium, in the strength of preaching, in daily reading of Scripture, in the daily lives of the faithful, in the experience of sanctity. And this is precisely what we have to do. Listen to the voice of the Spirit and draw very concrete consequences for today. in obedience to the Word of God, which for us is the word of our vocation. I imagine what I have just said could give rise to at least two observations or objections. Hence, I will try to anticipate them. We will save some time. The first and most obvious is you have presented the situation of the order in too negative and pessimistic a light. To that observation, I respond that I have said does not intend in any way to deny the many good and beautiful things that exist in our order and in all religious life and in the church and in the world. But the objective of the report was something else: to point out some urgencies that pose questions for us and that require deeper consideration on our part. It would be pessimistic to deny that the order holds a future, that it has a path to travel with a view to renewal and reinforcement of its charismatic identity and of its mission. On the contrary, the optimist is one who sets about searching for these ways towards the future. The second objection might be the following: what do you propose in concrete? What have you in mind regarding the renewal of the order and the way you tackle its challenges? You have told us the problems, but tells us something, a solution. It is true that I have been somewhat reticent on this point, but I did it so purposely for two reasons fundamentally. The first is that as I have said, that I believe that true reforms originate at grassroots levels and not from the top down, or better, in following the inspirations of the Spirit and not the decisions of authority. As such, I can invite vigilance and a word of caution, not to quench too quickly desires that may proceed from the Spirit. You know, sometimes they come also to the general. Yeah, sometimes he can inspire the general as well, the Spirit. If we have a healthy unrest and true humility within us, I believe that we are capable of receiving anything new the Spirit has to suggest to the Tiresian Carmel. My second reason is so that I should not wish to propose for the whole order a vision for renewal or reform that is based on my own personal vision and sensitivity. Reform might originate from one or other of the fundamental dimensions of our vocation, from putting emphasis on the interior and contemplative life, from a deepening appreciation of fraternal life, from a renewed missionary thrust. It is the Spirit. What is not important the point of departure or the method, but the Spirit. If we consecrate effort on an authentic Tiresian contemplative life, this cannot but have positive repercussions on fraternal life and on our missions as well. And the same can be said of fraternal life or missions, should they be if they are serious. In the report that I presented to the general chapter, I spoke of 4 functional imperatives, using language borrowed from sociology. It can begin from any of these. Yes, it's a language that doesn't belongs to our tradition. The integration of to adapt to the context. The model is reversible. What is important is really to be done, co-involving our life with it, It is not enough just to talk about it. Okay. I will finish with 2 words. So you know what awaits for us during this time. This time we will be together here. Yeah, this afternoon, the General Bursan will give his report on the central economic situation. Father Raphael will present important new elements regarding the life of our nuns from the Apostolic Constitution Vultum Dei Quaerere, and this will conclude the informative section of this definitory. The second part will deal with the program of rereading our constitutions. Tomorrow, Father Agosti and Father Emilio, President and Secretary, respectively, of the Commission for this program, will provide an estimate of the work done today, presenting an outline of the responses received from the provinces so far. Although we hope to have an extraordinary definitory in February 2019 and in Goa, in India, dealing especially with this matter of the constitutions, I think it is worthwhile to begin reflecting already on the direction we might consider taking. The third part of this definitory is a mini course for provincials, which will treat of the more pressing things for leadership of the provinces. The Definitory General thought such a course would be useful, both to clarify some juridical and procedural points that have not always been observed in practice, and also to assimilate useful material for the preparation of a new handbook for provincial government. As many of you are aware, the General Definitory approved a similar handbook in December 2006 after the Extraordinary Definitory in Chile. It approved it, although it was useful, it does not appear to have been great success. The Definitory, is not very much used. That's what we think. This Definitory wishes to repropose it with some helpful amendments. This part of our proceedings will conclude with a rather complex but particularly urgent juridical pastoral question. It regards the presence of some of our religions in circumscriptions to which they do not appertain. The increase of this phenomenon demands special attention from all of us. We confide our work to the intercession of Mary, our mother and sister. May she accompany us with her love and her protection. Amen.